Alright, in this section we're going to begin inverse trig functions. Let's first just talk about what they are. An inverse trig function will be written as an arcsine or arc cosine or arc tangent. You've also been familiar with them as seeing secant inverse on a calculator. So the first thing we're going to do is just fill in this chart. So the chart actually has -1, -0.8, and so on and so forth in it. So I'm just going to start showing you how to put those into your calculator. So you just hit sine inverse of -1, and it gives you that decimal. Then you hit sine inverse of -0.8, and you hit the answer. Oops, I hit sine inverse twice. I didn't mean to do that, so let's try that again. Sine inverse of -0.8. Then we can do sine inverse of -0.6. Just making you fill in a chart. -0.4. And you can do that rather quickly. Sine inverse of -0.2. Sine inverse of 0. I'm going to stop at this point. You guys have the idea of how you're doing that. Then you just need to fill in the chart for this. So you can continue on with that. Moving on then, we're also going to be doing it without a calculator. So how do you compute arcsine of 0? Well, what it's asking you to do is it is asking you to say sine of what? So sine of x equals 0. So if you're going to compute this without a calculator, we want to figure out where is the sign 0. So I know that in the unit circle there's 1, 0, and there's -1, 0. The sign of x is equal to 0, at pi, and so on and so forth. Normally we'll be giving some restrictions with that. But for right now, we're just going to say that x equals 0. That's one location where the sign x equals 0, or the arc sign is 0. Arc cotangent negative square root of 3. What it's really saying is, where is the cotangent of x equal to negative square root of 3? So I have to think a little bit on this one. First, I know that first of all, I know that cotangent is cosine x over sine x. Now, the square root of 3 comes into play when you have like a square root of 3 over 2 divided by a 1/2. Then you would get the square root of 3. We do want it to be negative, so I'll go ahead and put negative up there. So now I'm really thinking about where is the sine equal to 1/2 and the cosine equal to negative square root of 3 over 2. Well, all students take calculus. In the second quadrant, the sine is positive 1/2 and the cosine is negative square root of 3 over 2, or the cosine is negative. So we can start to think about where this would occur. This would be a reference angle of 30 degrees. So we'd be backing up here, so it'd be where x is equal to 150 degrees, or we can just express that as 5 pi over 6. For the next problem, really all we're asked to do is use our calculator again. So we'll type in what is the tangent inverse of -5. That is -1.373. So I'll just write that answer in here, -1.373. Okay, this problem again we're going to evaluate without using a calculator. The way we're going to do that is using a triangle on these problems. So what I'm really saying to myself here in this first part is I'm asking, where is the cosine equal to square root of 2 over 2? So what I'm going to do is draw a triangle to do this, and I'll put theta here. And I know cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So I'm going to go adjacent side would be here, hypotenuse would be here. I don't know what this side is until I use Pythagorean theorem. Square root of 2 squared plus question mark squared equals 2 squared. So I get 2 plus question mark squared equals 4. So I'll just start calling that x. X equals 2, and I'll square root both sides, and I get square root of 2. So this is the square root of 2. So now that I know that, I can now figure out the tangent of this part right here. So the tangent of my triangle, okay, and I'll just mark it as triangle rather than that, is equal to opposite over adjacent. So square root of 2 over square root of 2, which is a 1. Another problem like that, this one says the arc tangent, so I'm really thinking about where is the tangent of theta equal to 3 over 5. So I'll make a right triangle again, or negative 3 over 5. I'll put opposite over adjacent, so I'll put a negative 3 here, I'll put a 5 here. Using the Pythagorean theorem, I have negative 3 squared plus 5 squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So I have 9 plus 25 equals my hypotenuse squared. I get 34, and then I'll square root, and I'll get square root of 34. So that means this side is square root of 34. So now I can figure out my secant. Secant is really 1 over the cosine. Okay, so I'm going to do 1 over the cosine of my triangle. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So 1 over the adjacent hypotenuse. So I get 1 over the adjacent side would be 5 over the square root of 34, which 1 divided by that then ends up being the square root of 34 over 5.